Hey man, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm doing well, thank you.
You're good? What are you excited
Yeah.
about recently?
Uh, I started painting the office actually.
Okay.
This kind of long process of establishing a base, a creative studio where like-minded people can come together in real life. Slowly coming together. I do have a space actually in town, but we're trying to make it our own. I painted the wall yesterday just to give it a bit of life. It's this kind of beige white at the moment, and we painted it this kind of nice dark blue. We're just going to get some furniture. We're going to get some stuff and kind of just make it our own. That's really coming together, and it feels great, man. It's like it's our own space.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that you're not going with the cliche white-walled office, the creative, just white everywhere.
It's a very idiosyncratic building. Like it's old school. I might have mentioned it last time. It's like 1930s with 1970s interior. But there's something about it that's very nostalgic, and it's not trying to be anything that it's not. I'd love to have like exposed concrete walls and just sort of like the designer look, but at the end of the day, it's the space is one thing, but it's the people who make the space that really is what it needs to be. And so I love it. It's down to earth. No one really goes there. It's off the grid. It's kind of in a busy but quiet part of town. And it's just easy going. We can do whatever we want. So it's exactly what we need.
That's amazing, man. Is it in Wellington, did you say?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's in the CBD, in the central city, but really affordable. I don't know. There's sort of various things have happened. So it's like getting like commercial real estate is super cheap for some reason. Wellington's just dying from the inside. So it's like you can find space, and the whole building is like empty rooms. I'm actually going to do a photo shoot up on one of the other floors of the building, which is totally empty.
It's like liminal spaces.
Yeah, we'll talk about that liminal space. It's absolutely beautiful. I love it. I just go there. I went there today, actually. I went down to the beach with a friend. It was super nice weather today, so we went for a swim. Rena as well. So three of us went down, went for a swim, and then I dapped down and did another coat of paint on the wall. Dashed down to the office. So yeah, it's kind of a nice, convenient location, and it's what it needs to be.
Good, man. And you've got big ideas for it, which is really exciting. But just going back to the liminal spaces really quickly, isn't it funny how, so in our last podcast, you introduced me to the idea. I've actually never heard of liminal spaces before. So you introduced me to it. But it's funny how since then, I've been hearing about it everywhere. Like, honestly, I went to a book reading the other night. And the lady was reading from her book, and she started talking about liminal spaces. And I was on the train the other day reading the newspaper, and they started talking about liminal spaces. Is it the in thing at the moment, or what's going on?
It's hard to say. I wonder why that is. I think there's maybe people reevaluating their relationship to places. Definitely with lockdowns and certain things. The way you look at places changes. So yeah, potentially it's just become a kind of a cultural
topic.
Yeah,
interesting.
Speaking of that though, a friend gave me a book recently which I've been meaning to read. It's kind of inspired a lot of the work that inspires me. It's called Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. It's like a classic story of sort of these magical cities on the Silk Road. Marco Polo and Kubla Khan kind of talking about them. And it's really short. It's just tiny little kind of pamphlet of these stories. But it really is. I'll just read you this little blurb here, which I really love.
Please.
Yeah, cities like dreams are made of desires and fears. Even if the thread of their discourse is secret, their rules are absurd, their perspectives deceitful, and everything conceals something else.
Nice, man. Sounds right up your street.
Yeah, no, it really is great, and it kind of. Do you remember that time we watched Ginga
Tetsudo?
Yeah, was it the Night of the Galactic Railway?
Night on the Galactic Railroad. Yeah,
Miyazawa Kenji. So that kind of space. So Miyazawa Kenji is like one of my favorite authors, and he was a really interesting character. He grew up in Iwate back in the day. And in the he was writing in the sort of the 20s, 1920s, and he was really into kind of quite esoteric stuff like that. He was really into like C.S. Lewis and kind of that kind of magical realism, that whole thing. But that film kind of reminds me a lot, like that city that stories that the film was set in. That kind of reminds me a lot of the kind of stuff that this book is talking about. Like quite. Yeah, it's quite a strange feeling to read it, and then I don't know what to say. It really it's a different way of looking at things. It's very philosophical, very metaphorical.
Do you find it hard to keep up with it? Because it sounds like I would struggle to.
No, they're tiny little stories. They're like 2-page motifs. Like the first one. I'll just have a look here. I was reading it at the beach today. It's like 1 page. So it's like travelers return from the city of Zuma with distinct memories. A blind black man shouting in the crowd, a lunatic teetering on a skyscraper's cornice, a girl walking with a puma on a leash. Actually, many of the blind men who tap their canes on Zuma's cobblestones are black. In every skyscraper there is someone going mad. All lunatics spend hours on cornices. There is no puma that some girl does not raise as a whim. The city is redundant. It repeats itself so that something will stick in the mind.
That's so nice, man. That's really interesting. It sets such a nice scene. Creates such a good atmosphere.
And there was something else I was reading. There's something else I was reading recently as well. I'm just trying to remember what it was. I've been reading so many books lately, but I think it's set in Spain. It wasn't because we always talk about The Alchemist, but there's this other story that I was reading. It's in my pile, and I've been kind of like going through a cycle of them, and it reminds me of the same sort of thing. Like you can't really place it. When it was set, the sort of the places, the way they talk about it, it's just sort of very magical. And I think we were talking about this as well with the Ico game, PlayStation. That kind of the architecture of that game and the way that was designed, and just that kind of whole universe, the way they do it, I found that really inspiring.
Yeah. It's a magical. I've actually never played it. I've watched a lot of videos online, but I know exactly the atmosphere that you're talking about. And we did talk about this sort of like old school PlayStation 1 janky graphic, aesthetic, which was actually really good at building atmosphere.
I just remembered what that book was, 100 Years of Solitude.
Oh, yeah. That's super popular, right?
Yeah. So that, like the way this sort of the cities are described, and it's just, I don't know. It's like you've come across this gala, this carnival of gypsies in the middle of the night, and they take you on this journey to this magical faraway place, and it just that's the kind of feeling you get from that, and I really respond to that, especially right now because we're all stuck at home or whatnot. It just things are kind of going a bit slower, and there's something about that kind of the dreaming, that kind of fantasy. But not fantasy, as in dragons and flying around, but fantasy as in Fantasia, as in going away to these like places where anything could happen, and you didn't know what was waiting for you there. I really like that sort of thing.
I love it, man. You have to have a really good imagination though, like when you're going on these journeys, because to a layman, it would just be like, oh, I'm just going on a journey.
I don't know. I mean, the books, the reason I love literature so much is because it allows you the moment to just kind of conceive the universe that the author is trying to convey, like film and video games kind of makes that they do it for you. They do the imagining for you. But with books, you kind of have to do the imaging yourself in your head, the visualization, like.
Can you clearly visualize when you're reading a book, for example? Can you clearly visualize the words on the page into your mind? Like some people, if I ask you to imagine a horse, some people will literally be able to really clearly outline a horse in their head, right? And then other people, it's just like a dark, foggy mess.
I'm really interested in this concept, like to elaborate a bit, like definitely I do build images in my head and explore them, but I have this kind of concept of like the kind of this fountain of imagery, and often I found like just before I'm falling asleep or I'm trying to get fall asleep, and if I really relax, and maybe you feel this when you're meditating as well, but like I just feel like images that kind of morph into each other and just kind of they come at you. And that's the fountain from which visualization, imagination, all of these things come from. And it is just everything kind of coming at you. And in your daily life, you get so obsessed with different things that you forget about that. But when you just let yourself relax, sort of as you sleep, you close your eyes and you just sort of look into the back of your eye, your eyeballs, and you sort of can see these images sort of flow over you. And a keyword can kind of trigger this thing. And it's very dreamlike. But that's sort of where I believe that function of our imagination is where something like reading a book is tapping into that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our pattern seeking mode of thinking or something. I don't know quite what it is, but it's what allows, I think, humans to have this kind of creativity. There's this fountain of images and patterns that comes up all the time, and we try our best to kind of like stifle it, and it's things like smartphones and computers can actually really get in the way of that flow. But if you just sit there and think about it, and you just jump from image to image, and you think, okay, you got the horse, or you got the whatever, but then you can start filling that universe out, and you imagine the 100 years of solitude riding a horse along these these mountain tops and going through these towns and villages, and just anything you want, you can kind of explore it. And I find I really, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But you're very much a visual guy, though, aren't you?
Yeah.
You deal with visuals. Have you ever heard of voxel art? Have you ever heard this? Yeah, where they build the worlds in the 3D
kind of Minecraft kind of things.
Yeah. Is it for games or movies or something? I'm not sure, but it's like they're building these worlds with blocks, right? But it's there's a YouTube channel called Mad Maraca, Mad and then Maraca, and she builds these beautiful, incredibly detailed worlds. And every video of hers, I think, is just basically her starting from the blank canvas, and then finishing after building this beautiful city or this church or like really sci-fi kind of worlds. It sounds like a lot, kind of like a lot what we're talking about here, sort of like tripping into another world.
There's actually there's that game, The Last Night, I think it was at E3 a couple of years ago, and it's based on voxels. But yeah, I think the concept of voxels is really interesting, but they are kind of building blocks, but yeah, no, definitely that style, I think it's kind of like harkening back to like the 8-bit kind of older style, because you are limited with what you can do. So it doesn't quite have the same detail, but it allows you to kind of build smaller things, and then you imagine what they are if you were to, these kind of small 4-pixel, 8-pixel kind of characters, or from a Game Boy game or something. That's not enough to really see the detail, so you have to imagine the detail, and it makes it more intimate in that way, I think.
That's it. You create it in your head, just like reading a book. Yeah,
and so that's why I think for me as well, like I'm not really into sort of super special effects, kind of showing too much. Like I think the less you show, the more that's implied. You're, the best renderer you're ever going to have is in your head. No matter how good it looks on the screen, it becomes almost unreal, I think. And you've got that classic uncanny valley. You've heard of that, I'm assuming. Where you've got these kind of 3D characters, but they're so done up, and it's so much information, your brain can't actually process it. Whereas something very minimalistic and ambient can actually be a lot more powerful. With anything, music, you can listen to Wagner and you can imagine his entire universe, the Ring of the Nibelungs, you can see it, I can hear it in the music, the story, the calls of Siegfried. But if you were to visualize that and make that into this like 3D epic, it wouldn't quite be the same, I don't think.
Yeah, and actually, I just as we're talking about this now, I realize this is what I'm really attracted to in your photography. Like going back to when I first saw Dante Dreams, which I think you've got behind you. Is that on the wall?
Yeah, it is.
The picture behind you that's Dante Dreams. The image that you've taken is just of an empty room or an empty corridor, an empty hallway, which at first glance is empty. But of course, if you use your imagination to imagine all the generations of people who have passed through that space, if you use your imagination to try and imagine how it sounds, and you can hear the closing doors in the distance, you can hear the child screaming, crying for dinner or something like that, you can hear the footsteps up and down the stairs in those hallways. Your mind fills the blanks, and that makes your image, which at first glance seems empty, alive, come alive.
Yeah, exactly. You're building the set from which the characters emerge, and there's something about that which is really important, I think. You're respecting your audience. You're respecting the person looking at the image or engaging with the artwork to actually do that. That's the role that they play, is to actually imagine what goes into it. But if you tell them, you give them all the answers and you show them everything, you spoon feed it, they never get the opportunity to engage with it at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this kind of fragment, this kind of poppy kind of thing that doesn't really have any substance. And unfortunately, the world promotes that at the moment. I was having a really good conversation today around how we've got such short time preferences that everything is now. It is zero time preference, like Uber Eats, TikTok, all of this stuff, social media. We've talked about this before, and it's just there's no room to say listen to an entire album or to watch a Tarkovsky film in all of its 2 hours.
Playlists now, man. Everybody listens to playlists. That's it. There's no albums. But there's a lot of advertising on the London Underground at the moment for these grocery companies that they're called Gorillas or Wheezy. There's a couple of them, and basically they're advertising groceries in minutes, and their whole marketing spiel is like, if you order food from us, we will get it to you like super quickly.
That's fucked up.
That's really bad, isn't it, man? That's crazy shit.
Like when I'm cooking, like we cook quite a bit now. Like we didn't cook so much when we were living overseas, but in New Zealand, we've got access to all of this great fresh produce and that, and great, cheeses, meats, everything you need. And when we're cooking, man, it's this beautiful creation of food. We put music on. It becomes a theater, a dance, and it's like, man, if it takes an hour and a half to make some food, that's what it does, because that refreshes us and energizes our lives. And sometimes we're busy and we might eat out or we'll do a quick meal, but when the time comes, it's like, we're gonna make something for real. And you can't, if you shortcut that, you're just like cutting yourself off from like one of the pleasures of life,
Everything fast is crazy, man. Like it started with fast food and then fast fashion. Everything has just got to be fast.
So I'm going to blow your mind. But by the way, I do have some questions here from one of our listeners, which I do want to go over. But I'm going to blow your mind with a concept which I've been floating with a few people lately. But I really do believe, so there's a lot of things happening in the world right now, a lot of difficult times. New Zealand we're struggling. Like we're on this precipice between like maybe being okay or maybe being like a kind of a quasi totalitarian kind of like lockdown at whim, no self-control, not being able to do anything with your lives, not being able to plan anything just with the current way things are going. And it's a bit uncomfortable and there's a lot of anxiety floating around, but I feel like it's all connected in a way. And what I believe, or what I feel is happening, is that we're kind of approaching the end game of this low time preference, kind of effectively a debt-based society. And that debt is have now, pay later. And so for our entire lives, for the last, however hundreds of years, we've lived in this system of have now, pay later. And at first it was, maybe longer term, say, get a mortgage. You get a mortgage and you pay it off over 30 years. But now we've got to the point where everything is now, and everything, paying for that is all later. It's our kids' problem, it's our grandkids' problem. It's put on the credit card, it's put on the national debt. Everything at the high and the low level, I feel, is connected. And so that a lot of the issues we're having right now, I think, are because that system is starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
And people don't really necessarily realize it, but there's something wrong with this idea, and everything from climate change to just kind of mental health, everything is, I think, connected to this debt-based society, whether it's time debt, do now and you have to make up for it later, pay now, but actually you're paying it off later. All of that stuff I feel is, pushing stuff off, pushing responsibility off into some distant future. And so what you get is people burning away their lives on this kind of short-term dopamine hit. They're zooming around, they're twittering around, tindering around, but not actually building any valuable long-term structures within their life.
Yeah.
Like you look at something like, the greatest operas, the greatest films, the greatest, pieces of literature, and they all took years, decades to create,
Yeah.
I mean, how many people are undertaking work like that in this time? Because our attention spans are so short. It's like, no, we'll do it later. And it's leading to this kind of like cultural shift where it's like nothing really matters anymore. It's this nihilism. And even financially, it's like, man, everyone's just hocking themselves up. The house across the road from me is just, we had a letter. I mean, we're just renting, right? We're just proletarians here, but a house across the road and not a very particularly nice house. It's this thing coming, offers starting from $1.85 million.
Wow.
Which is absolutely insane. And New Zealand, I mean, I don't know did you see the Guardian article I had come out the other day?
Yes. Well, I want to talk about that, but we can talk about it later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But anyway, so like, we got this like, no one in this country can afford $1.85 million. And that's the starting, the house is going to go for, $2 million plus. Nobody in Wellington makes that sort of money. And if you work out the average, the annual salary that it takes to pay that off, no one makes that sort of money in New Zealand. So someone's hocking themselves up for a huge mortgage. And, maybe they're not, but, there's something fundamentally flawed about that system. And I feel like it's kind of starting to crumble. I don't know. What is your thoughts on that?
So this all reminds me that we are literally, with our culture, Western culture specifically, is kicking the can down the road. This is the phrase that I love, right?
Yes.
This is literally what we are just doing. We've got a can in front of us and we're just kicking it down the road, and we'll deal with the problems later. Just keep doing it. And I guess if we think about it big level, the problem is that we have such a short political cycle, right? So politics in the UK, and I don't know about New Zealand, but every 4 years there's a new leader, right? And in America as well, every 4 years, yes, they can go to 8 years if they get reelected. But basically, all the politicians are trying to do is appease everything for 4 years before they get kicked out of office. And it leads to these problems where you kick the can down the road and you just ignore things. We'll pay for it later. We'll sort it out later. Yeah. Next cycle.
Yeah, and I think that has only been accelerating though. Like I think there was a golden time once upon a time when there were visionary leaders and there were people who were building the country. And one of the things I find fascinating is, if you look at some like infrastructure in New Zealand, there's been no new infrastructure investment for 50 years. They build roads here and there, and they build tunnels here and there. But the city of Wellington, the state highway, everything here that's kind of fundamental was all built in the 70s. And it's just been kind of maintained. And at that point in time, it was like, people were saying, well, what's a 100-year plan going to look like? What's New Zealand going to be like in 100 years? But now, you can't even put up a fence without, having to deal with all of this sort of red tape. And there's so many barriers to it. And it's like, it is nihilistic. People are like, well, why bother? And it's that exact sort of attitude, I think, which leads to this kind of cultural deprivation where it's like, and I mean, it's very much in line with, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Frankfurt School of Thought.
No.
So that's the kind of, I mean, it's something to be aware of. I think it's not necessarily correct or whatnot, but it's this kind of group of German theorists working in the 1920s, 1930s, and they were sort of basically, university professors and they were talking about how sort of pop music and modern music had changed people's attention spans and in sort of lockstep with changes in the industrial process. So you went from artisanal sort of building things by hand to kind of Ford, the Ford style building, production lines and that coincided with the rise of pop music effectively.
Right.
And so you went from 3-hour operas to 3-minute pop songs. which was in line with the changes from, seasonal kind of lifetime kind of, or even sort of bigger than that, sort of the spiritual time frame of pre-modern societies where, the individual didn't really matter to the individual as this kind of cog in the machine, just making another widget. And so the music and kind of the things that, because, music's got a very spiritual power, I think. And so if your music that you listen to is a 3-minute piece, as opposed to, say, this kind of unending hymn of spiritual kind of, it's like a sutra or something that you just say continuously, it never actually ends. But if you're listening to only a 3-minute song, it's like that's kind of encapsulates your life in a way.
It's quite interesting though, because when they started recording pop music on 45s on 45 RPM records, those small tiny records, they had a time limit of I think 3 minutes on one side. So I think pop music was limited by these time limits that were imposed on them by the recording medium. But yeah, I think there was, you're right, there was a change in like what we focused on, and our attention span was getting shorter and shorter.
That's interesting, man, because there's another theorist called Marshall McLuhan who you might have heard of.
Yeah.
He's one of these kind of like pop, like sort of popular kind of cultural kind of figures. But he had this concept of like the medium as the message, right? And so if you've got a limit of 3 minutes, then that is the message is that, 3 minutes is the limit of your attention span. And it can be applied to so many different things. And now, we're still in that space, but people's ability to engage with things, I think, generally speaking, at a higher, longer level, kind of a deeper level potentially, is really challenged. There's so many barriers to that. And why, the fact that some people aren't actually just Uber eating and, sort of dopamine hitting continuously is a miracle, I think,
Yeah, well, you got to pay the bills, man. But now the attention span of the modern teenager, I guess, is 15 seconds? Is it Instagram story or TikTok videos? 15 seconds.
Yeah, that's the new 3 minutes, man.
Mental, isn't it?
It's crazy, and it's that challenge though, because one of the secondary effects of that is that people's engagement with, say, historical precedent or these kind of longer term goals, right? So the founding fathers of the United States, or the Magna Carta, or massive, some of the work in New Zealand around engaging with New Zealand as kind of a new way of doing colonialism, and then all of these different big ideas that it's like, man, you should at least have an idea of what's going on. The ability to do that is so limited because people just don't have time to read a book.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I'm seeing is with this current decline of society, which it really does feel like, as we kind of move towards effectively totalitarianism in the West, I feel. The ability, restriction of movement, restriction of free association, all of these kind of quite heavy-handed responses to this virus. And I'm very interested in how that connects with the kind of the lack of people's engagement and realization that this has been done before, and it's been done, and every time it's been done, it's turned out really bad for everyone,
Because they're being entertained by Netflix and sitting at home and watching their TVs, and so they're being distracted, right? Literally, generally. Man, it's really scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, I don't know what to do, man. Like, I mean, I think it's good to talk about it because I think a lot of people don't. And I mean, it's super. In New Zealand, it's really difficult, man. All of the media here are pretty much, under the thumb of the government. And
especially over in Australia as well. It's crazy.
Yeah,
right.
It's crazy, man. I mean, they're literally in Melbourne, and I know we might have some listeners from Victoria and Melbourne and that, but I mean, it's insane. They've been in lockdown for like 200 days.
Isn't there a lot of protests going on at the moment?
Yeah, I think there were, and the police were shooting at them. And I mean, look, there's different ways of looking at it, but it's like at the end of the day, what's going on, guys? This is a virus. It's not about shooting people in the street, and just take it easy, man. But it doesn't. That's not how these systems work. And what really, again, I've got this Solzhenitsyn book here. He's he survived the gulags in the Soviet Union. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I literally found this book. I was at the YMCA in Auckland a couple of months ago, and I picked it up, and it was just sitting there on a free pile of books. So I took it and read through it. It's not the Gulag Archipelago. It's just his biography, but it's really interesting because he basically lived through it. And I think my take on it is he was like, look, all of the problems that led to the gulags and the massive purges and all of the issues of the Soviet Union were because of human failings, but magnified, so all of the issues of human kind of greed or all of these sort of incentives were just magnified, and that was what led to this like massive suffering. And I think in a way that's kind of what's happening as well with this kind of financial system, this kind of debt-based society where it's like all of the incentives are leading to this like negative outcome of like climate change, kind of mass production of stuff that we don't need, short attention spans, kind of all of that, all of those issues. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas at you.
No, it's good, man. It's good. But I'm a bit worried about how things are going to progress moving towards Christmas. Of course, that is even more buying, even more wasting, even more producing of stuff that we don't need. I think I'm hypersensitive to all of this stuff now. So living in England, which is we do really focus on Christmas as this big celebration. I think I will approach it a bit more carefully and mindfully. This year.
Yeah. I do have hope. I will just say one more thing on that topic. I do have a lot of hope for the long-term prospect of this, and I do believe it's going to come out in the form of a new system that will emerge from this. And look, potentially it's going to be something based on Bitcoin, as we've talked about before, where it's like instead of a debt-based society, you've got this kind of appreciation of this kind of savings-based society where, the universe of invisible cities, the kind of the world of Kublai Khan, it's like building the tower of, building the citadel, as they say. And it's like that stuff takes vision and long-term thinking, and an asset like Bitcoin as the basis for a financial system would enable that kind of world. Whereas
it's going to happen, man.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. So I'm quite optimistic, but it's hard, man. There's a lot of, I think, anxiety floating around in people's minds, and
I think we just had El Salvador adopt Bitcoin last month or something. There's a few other countries that are looking into making it legal tender. I think these are the beginnings of something happening.
It's new, man. It's the change that we've been waiting for. It's the change that humanity needs, and I'm super inspired. And we can talk more about that some other time, I guess. But I think we're moving, and that's the thing that gives me hope, is that this will change just the way humans engage with each other. Instead of this kind of zero-sum kind of debt-based society, where actually, as everyone's growth, as the world grows, everyone's, slice of Bitcoin grows, everyone gets more prosperous, and it's just going to be a new system,
We kind of need people to wake up from Netflix, man. You got to turn off Netflix and sort of snap.
Well, the classic example, again, you got the Kublai Khan stuff, but the classic example people say is the Renaissance. That was all built. The reason we had a Renaissance was because of it was a gold-backed economy at the time. And gold's kind of inferior to Bitcoin, but it's still a solid asset. And so you can put away, a chunk of gold for 100 years, and it will still be worth something in 100 years.
Absolutely.
And so you can say, look, go ahead, build the Sistine Chapel. Because I can bequeath that money and say, all right, you just go ahead and do it, guys, even if I'm not here, and it will happen. Whereas if you do that with fiat currency, it's like, man, your money's lost its value after 10 years. But anyway, man, that's enough on the economics. I do have some questions.
We're getting into politics and economics today. Let's steer away from that. So you got some questions. Yeah. I'd love to hear.
I do. So my question here is, how do you pack for your travels? The few times I've been anywhere, I try to pack light, and with equipment, I feel it gets more complicated. Maybe that's one for me first, and then you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so for me, in terms of packing, I'm a minimalist. I've only recently started acquiring kind of air quotes junk, just sort of having a beard, that sort of stuff. But effectively, for 2 years, I was living out of Patagonia bags. So I'm a big fan of Patagonia, no affiliation, but just their equipment, their like packing system is really sweet because you can just put stuff in and it will just hold it. So I tended to have like 2 large Patagonia bags, and then if I was traveling with Rena, we got 4 between us, and then 1 carry-on bag. So that is pretty much enough to carry is everything we need. Usually I put the cameras and the electronics in like my backpack and take it on the plane. And then tripod, clothes, and everything else goes into the Patagonia black hole bags. That's I think that's actually what they're called. They're like 70 liter bags, and then I think I might have like a 40 liter one as well. But yeah, really minimalistic. Recently, I'm really getting into merino clothing. This sounds really weird, but basically it's like a super thing. So you only need like 3 merino t-shirts, and that's because they don't. For some reason, they dry really quickly. You don't need to it's like with cotton. If you wash it, you got to dry it. But with merino, you can wear it a couple of days in a row if you want. But if you wash it, it takes like only a couple of hours to dry.
Okay.
Air dry. It's super. So I've kind of changed all of my clothing out to be like merino based. So I do that. So it's like packing less stuff. Usually I have quite a big tripod, so I usually wrap the clothing around that to kind of stop it getting damaged. The other kind of critical things for traveling would be like a neck brace thing for when you're on the airplane.
Oh yeah, must.
And yeah, but yeah, I don't know. What about you, man?
Man, so I've traveled, usually always when I've traveled, it's for moving to a new country to start work. So after university, went to Finland. After Finland, went to South Korea to, Malaysia, etc. So every time I went, I was a serial seller. Like I would sell all of my stuff before I left or before I left to move to a new country or before I left that country to move to the next one. I would just sell everything. And now, 10 years later, I really regret a lot of the stuff that I've got rid of over the years. I wish I had a bit more foresight, a little bit there, I guess. There's some really old, I had this beautiful old negative projector, the little 35 millimeter negative photos that you can get, and you can put them in the slide projector and project on the wall. I had this beautiful old one from England, decades ago it was made. And before I moved to Finland, I sold it. And now I wish I still had that thing. But anyway, so I'm a serial seller. I tried to go very minimalist. I tried to get rid of everything, and then I moved to the next place. But recently I've sort of when I left Japan, I tried to ship as much as I could over to England because I was afraid of doing what I'd done for years before and throwing away something that I really missed. But if we're just talking holidays, when I'm going traveling to Morocco, for example, I always take a little field recorder and a pair of headphones, and that's all I need. I'm very blessed in that sound recording is, I can take such a small device like the Edirol R44, I think I have. I just slap it in a bag, pair of headphones, make sure I've got a wind cover and stuff like that, and I'm good to go, and I'm good to record. And I do feel very blessed in that. I can pack a laptop if I want to, or I can just upload it all when I get home. It's nice.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I guess on that note, I am a fan of minimalism, though I guess what I've tended to do is take longer excursions, as in months. So I remember when the last time we were on the road properly, we had actually intended on going to Russia, and so we had all of this winter gear. And we never even made it out of the tropics, pretty much. So it was I was for months I was lugging around these feather down jackets and stuff. But it kind of doesn't matter so much because I prefer to have the gear so that we know, it's like passport. You got the passport, you got the travel docs. That's all you need. to go anywhere else. And that feeling of like having, it's like quite nomadic. It's almost like a character from one of these like books, the kind of, on the Silk Road, with everything you need. I prefer that over being like knowing that I have to return back after only a week.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I've tended to take more stuff with me, and that I guess changes depending on the destination, but generally like a couple of check-in bags. I don't know if I'd really want to do just like carry on only for an extended excursion. But I know what you mean about selling stuff. Like I got rid of a whole lot of stuff each time I've moved, and I don't think you say you regret it, but I don't think it's a bad thing, man. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's just a few things that I really miss, but everything's replaceable, man.
Yeah, and if you were the kind of person who couldn't get rid of stuff, maybe you wouldn't have made those journeys.
Yeah, true.
So
that's a good point.
And then sometimes it's like, I mean, I got some books still that are in Japan that I'd like to send over, but that's about the only thing that I really miss, like some of my old books. But, stuff, it can actually weigh you down quite a lot, literally. But like, yeah, I think, the time for collecting stuff maybe as you get older, maybe. But when you're younger, it's like, man, just let it go,
Absolutely. And I mean, this talks to the wider sort of rental economy that we're sort of entering into blindly. Like everything at the moment is rental. You rent your movies from Apple, or you rent your books from Amazon, Kindle. There's adverts all over the tube at the moment about renting the stuff in your home that you don't use. Like if you have some power tools, some drills and stuff that you never use, you can put them on this website and people can hire them from you for a week or something. Everything seems to be going towards having nothing and everything.
Being happy with it.
Yeah. Here we go. Exactly. And being happy with it.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because like there's certain things, I do have certain things that are really special. So I have a compass that my grandfather gave me when I was probably like 10 years old, and I've had it with me the whole time. I had it with me in Japan. I've got it right behind me in the bookshelf. Made in Germany. He used to use it like orienteering around Wellington and stuff, and like for me that's an heirloom,
Yeah.
And it's really meaningful, because it's like the compass, the wanderer, this kind of mythologies of the self. So that's an example of like a small trinket that's kind of, important to me. But in terms of renting power tools, it's like, yeah, I mean, I get that, I think there's almost people are talking about like experiential kind of things that's sort of becoming more popular now. So not so much owning things, but the experience of stuff, which is, I don't know if it's a negative, people, living for the moment and doing more important kind of things with their friends, that sort of stuff. I don't know if that's a negative, I guess, but it's different, I think, to maybe the previous narrative of like owning stuff and just being like bogged down with all this junk.
Yeah, own a house, fill it up.
Yeah, fill it up. Cool. So yeah, that's talking about equipment and how we travel. Yes. We have another question here. Do you guys ever get homesick? I think my family dynamics never really taught us it's okay to just leave and be somewhere for a while. Talk about the art of being alone.
Ooh, that's a tough one. So I wasn't homesick for maybe 8 years of 10 years being away from England. I was always like fueled by the excitement of being in a new country or new job, new city, finding new stuff. But I realized that like whenever I moved to a new place, like South Korea, for example, when I got there, one of the very first things I did was find out where I can get the comforts of home, should I want them. Like the first thing I would do is try and find an international supermarket. I wanted to be able to go and buy English sweets or cookies or something, whatever. And I kept doing this every single country I visited. One of the first things I do is like hunt out an international supermarket. And then I just got to the point where I was like, why do I keep doing this? Like, maybe this just means I shouldn't be away from home. Maybe I do miss it a lot more than I thought I did. And yeah, for the last 2 years before I came back, it was real bad nostalgia. But the second part of the question, because there seems to be two parts to that question. The second part is more about loneliness, right? Loneliness, as I'm sure you know, Cody, was serious in Japan. As a foreigner in Japan, it doesn't matter how well you speak the language, you probably will find it hard to connect on a super deep level to the Japanese people. They're an absolutely beautiful group of people, but there is this sort of like big divide between you and them. And I talk about this a lot, but you know, I ran a cafe in Tokyo, a successful cafe, I would say so. And so therefore I was surrounded by people all day. From the moment we opened the door to the moment we closed the door at night, I was surrounded by people, lovely, loving, gift-giving, beautiful people. But I did feel very lonely. And I think it was because I just couldn't have the deep connections that I really craved from Japan. Because, you know, on a practical level, the language barrier was a big one. And then on top of the language barrier, you've got the cultural barrier. So how did I deal with it? I made a lot of music, and I worked with you, Cody, a lot.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, man. Like, I think for me, probably similar. Like just leaving. I think it's important to talk about leaving. You know, I left New Zealand, and looking back, you know, I really much. I feel like I escaped New Zealand. I was really deeply unhappy being here, and at that time, I mean, even today, still, you know, there's not a lot of opportunity in this country. There is, but there's not. You know, it's a very small place. I felt kind of hemmed in, and very much like there wasn't anything here for me. And I craved, as a young man, I craved the dream and the promise of what lay beyond. Just like Marco Polo or whoever, you know, all these kind of characters that sort of, you know, go on the journey, the hero's journey. And so that was what drove me. And then once I left, I became deeply interested in my relationship with home. And a lot of my work today and up until now has been connected with this idea of home, because very quickly you sort of, you know, just like a cicada, you kind of like shed your skin of what you think you are and what home means. And so this idea of New Zealand as this kind of nation, this kind of patriotism or whatever, you know, I used to watch rugby. I used to kind of participate in a lot of this kind of mass media stuff, and it was so useless and boring looking back, but it was kind of identity building. And when you're living in a country where there was no other New Zealanders, and so you become this like representation of the place that you came from. And it's like, well, actually, I don't even know what that means, you know, because I can't fill in for all of New Zealand. It's such a different, you know, there's different countries, different cities, different kind of areas. I can only be myself. And so, you know, you start to shed off the bullshit, and you go kind of get down to the root of it. And for the first couple of years, I didn't even really talk to my family, to be honest. Like, I had the phone calls every now and then, but there was like this really important period of cooling off from my relationship with my family, which now, you know, I'm a lot closer, I think, and it's a lot more of a mature relationship. But at the time, I really just needed some space. And that's what I got, you know, and that led to me going very deep and introspective into myself. I totally agree with your comments about Japan and Japanese people. Like, I've had I think it's important to clarify here, like, every single individual, whether they're Japanese or not, has this difficulty with when you're in Japan. You know, I think it's almost easier for us because we can we can kind of hang out and do our own thing. But for say, a Japanese person, they're deeply lonely, I believe, and that comes through in everything from the music to the film to the culture. It's just the way it is, and that's what inspired me so deeply about the literature and the film and everything, is that it kind of comes from that space, and that kind of mono no aware, that kind of deep loneliness and melancholy for life. And if you didn't have that, it wouldn't be the thing that we really love, So it's this kind of very challenging dynamic, and the loneliness aspect of it. I mean, even just looking at my life today, it's like it's so starkly different. Like I had a friend round last night, and man, like it's like just let yourself in. Like he lives just next door, and people come and go, and we catch up, and it's like nothing's an issue, nothing's off topic. We can communicate really smoothly, and we're never intruding on each other. It's like we kind of, I flicked a message to my friend this morning and said, "Hey, do you want to go to the beach?" And we swang by his house, picked him up, and went to the beach. Like there wasn't this kind of unspoken kind of formality, It's like, and that was something that it took me like 5 years to like go through that, to then be able to come back and really appreciate my fellow countrymen and what I do get in New Zealand socially from that sort of angle, and family, and all of that. But in terms of being alone, I also think that that's really formative, because when you're stuck with yourself and that fountain of imagination that I spoke about earlier, I believe that can only really come when you're in this sort of deep state of sort of self, where you're sort of just existing, and just sort of floating along. And maybe that's sort of a meditative state, but sort of being alone and away from everything else, it just gives you I think it's possible to find this kind of inner peace, and then you can come back and re-engage with people from a more powerful position of kind of love and kind of connection, whereas if you're kind of bombarded and constantly around people, you maybe don't get that opportunity to kind of really long for them in a metaphorical sense, and so I do value, and maybe you're feeling this at the moment. I know you're sort of perhaps alone at the moment, right? And so that's that kind of periods of distance that actually enable the love when you are together,
I love that. That's really nice. Yeah. And for me, I feel like meditation is sort of like an opportunity to step away from living for a second or 15 minutes or something, and then reevaluate how you hold yourself in the world, how you go through the world, how you're living, reevaluate sort of who you are as a person, and it gives you a much better approach to living, because you can make yourself aware of parts that you don't necessarily like, or parts you want to work on, or parts that you do enjoy about life. Meditation is a great opportunity to sort of like see these.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm not formally trained or anything, and I know the word gets thrown around quite a lot, but I'll just meditate, or and what actually, just as an off topic, I find really interesting. I've seen these like apps that promote meditation. Have you seen that?
Calm and all this.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting because it's like this like bastardized kind of thing. It's like you can use your smartphone to meditate, and I'm like, no, that's not quite how it works. But literally, like for me, it really does come down to this idea of just focusing my mind on that fountain of images that's like spewing up constantly inside my head, and just watching it, all of the thoughts, all of the ideas, all of the things that are just there, but just like watching it go past, and before I sleep or whatever, and just sort of seeing it and just watching the videotape of it kind of unfold. And that's all I need to do. And then I'm like, everything's okay. It's the way it needs to be. And I could do that in my bed, comfortable at home, or I could do that, in the most difficult situation. I'm stuck in some fucking Shanghai prison cell, letting those images sort of like spew out and just watching them. And it's like, I'm here and everything's okay and everything's right with the universe. And in that way, it's almost like, it's getting a bit deep, but it's like building that kind of connection with God. If, whatever you believe God to be, the universe or the creator or whatnot, it's like you're just kind of connecting with that energy source, and then you just touch it, and it's like you press the button, and you just kind of you get that like energization, and then it's like from that space, that's where idea generation happens, and that's like people talk about shower thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason that happens is because the shower is the only place where you're not actually engaging with a phone, and you're just and you're just watching the water flow like in front of your face. It's exactly the same thing. That's where the best ideas come from, right?
I think it's something also, I don't know about, I'm just guessing here, but I think it's something, it might be something about the white noise as well, of the sound of the shower just like envelops you so much.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
You're in a small bubble where you can't hear outside of that bubble. You don't have your phone or anything.
Yeah, I really like that actually, because the other thing is it's quite warm.
Yeah,
it's almost it's like you're in the placenta, like it's quite this sort of.
I think we're onto something. Yeah. There it is.
Yeah, I think we're creating some ideas here, but I know I do think about this quite a lot. I would say I probably spend a good, time every day. I spend thinking about my connection to the world, my own life, my own place in the universe, that sort of thing. And it always just, I come back to it and I think, this is my connection to the world, and that it kind of, because it's easy to get really hyped up and kind of, you're busy, stressed out doing stuff, but it's like, you do need to take a step back and be like, well, look, I'm just this person here doing this thing. As many have done before me, and many will do in the future. Life is finite, and I think people forget that. And I think that's one of the things about COVID that's really gotten people is like, well, actually, people die,
Yeah.
And it's so impossible to comprehend for people now in this kind of media age, because no one dies; everyone's forever young. Whereas it's somehow, I don't know, like you sort of see yourself age, and you sort of see your life kind of go before you, and you're like, well, I'm just doing what I need to be doing. I'm just the honeybee going and pollinating. As was it Marcus Aurelius? The bee, the vine produces the grapes. It doesn't complain. It doesn't worry. It just creates the grapes.
Yeah.
The honeybee just goes and pollinates. It doesn't stress out about it.
Yeah.
It does what it's meant to do. And as humans, we're meant to love, create, and share experiences together.
I love that. Yeah.
And we kind of got lost along the way somewhere, creating money and systems that don't actually enable that.
That creativity.
Ultimately, that's human. That's human. That's ultimately what we are. Is we're creation engines, idea pattern creation engines, in this kind of biological form. But anyway, our next question,
man. Yeah, let's go. Next question.
Are you guys currently reading anything? Any recommendations? So we've already talked about Invisible Cities.
Yeah.
So what have you got anything you're reading at the moment?
Yes. Actually, this is something I wanted to really quickly, just before I answer that question. Recently, I accidentally deleted my Amazon account. Now, people are going to ask, how the fuck did you accidentally delete your Amazon? I thought that there were separate accounts for Amazon.com and Amazon.co.uk.
Are they not separate?
The reason I thought that is because no. So the Amazon.co.jp account, the one for Japan, is separate. So if you delete it, it doesn't affect your UK one. And I thought, stupidly, I assumed that the .com was the same, and I could delete the .com and not affect my UK account. How wrong I was. I deleted maybe 80 Kindle books. I love the Kindle. I'm a big fan of the Kindle. Deleted my whole collection. Gone. All of my books gone. And what happened? I had this moment where I was like, okay, I need to start rebuilding my book collection again. But now I have a choice. Do I go back to the Kindle route and buy all my books on Kindle again, or do I start going down the physical book route? And I know what your answer would probably be, right? Physical books, I imagine. So I have this sort of like, I'm in this in between period where I'm starting to think about buying more books, and I'm like, do I buy digital? Anyway, if you have any ideas, please send them in. Back to the question. I just finished Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers. I think we talked about it a little while ago. Absolutely loved that. That was fascinating. I read Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus, the second one, not the first one. I read the first one a long time ago, and then now reading the second one. And very interestingly, I just started listening to an audiobook, which I've never done before. This is my first audiobook. It's called 2034, and it's completely fiction. There's nothing real in it, but it's about the future war between China and America, and it will be a cyber one. So it's about basically China has like wiped out the American sort of infrastructure.
Yeah, so a lot of non-fiction sort of. Concept. I can appreciate that. I think I probably tend towards more fiction. Like I'm reading. I started working through Invisible Cities, but I've got this massive book called Shanghai by Christopher New. It's from like the 80s. I found it in the secondhand bookstore, but it's like 500 pages of just like 1920s roaring Shanghai kind of opium dens and triads and stuff. But it's really interesting though, because it's super detailed historically, and I'm really interested in Shanghai. So I've been working through that, and that's kind of been like backlogging all my other reading, because I've been just trying to slog through that one. But yeah, man, no, definitely. I can recommend Invisible Cities as kind of a collection, and I can recommend physical books, man. Like, I've done Kindle, and it's good on the airplane and stuff, like when I was traveling. But I think when I'm home, it's like there's nothing you can match with like that kind of smell of a book, you know?
Yeah, and the feel of a book, yeah.
And then I guess the last question. Oh, we had another question here about Megatech Body album. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. Sorry, what's that? Megatech Body.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm going to have to listen to that. So asking about that album, which I'll have to listen to, and then any new music you've been listening to. For myself, I've been listening to a lot of. I found this music called "Music for the Cryo Chamber." I sent that to you as well, didn't I?
Yeah, it's great.
What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's very like meditative sort of.
It's just. Yeah.
It's something you want to listen to in the womb.
yeah. And then the shower, maybe. But to be honest, that's the only sort of music. That's the only sort of thing that I can listen to when I'm really doing deep work.
Yeah.
So and I love how each one has its own little description. That's sort of like music for faraway places, or like the space chamber. Like, so I've been listening to that playlist, and then also in terms of Japanese stuff, I found Meiko Kaji. She's this old school kind of like soul, kind of deep, kind of not quite Enka, but quite beautiful. So that's sort of like, I'm just trying to find what period that was from, but it's definitely like a lot older. So I've been listening to that, but yeah, a lot of just ambient stuff. I got like a really tight YouTube sort of curation going on now. So
nice. The YouTube algorithm is fantastic. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, you gotta train it. It's like a dog, you know. You just gotta tell it when it's right and not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Have you been listening to anything new?
Oh man, you know what? Like, I have been listening to a lot of podcasts recently. I've been getting really into sort of like listening to podcasts, and this audiobook that I'm listening to, I'm not really listening to much new music, which is really sad. So I'd love to sort of reach out a bit and kind of, I have this desire to just go to a record shop and just buy a random record and, enjoy that. So I might do that soon. I might just pop into the local rough trade we have in London here.
I like it. Same with books, man. Like, you just pick one up and be like, all right, I like the cover, let's go,
Exactly.
But anyway, there was a few other questions, but I think we can cover those maybe in our next call.
This is going on, but
might open up.
I just searched Megatech Body just really quickly. It seems to be like the Ghost in the Shell soundtrack or something like that.
No, actually, I know. I know where that question came from now, because I posted a photo of that soundtrack because I was visiting a friend and he had it there, and I just took a photo and put it on Instagram, I think, on my story. So that's where that question's coming from. So I may be qualified now to answer this. So let me have a look here. Let's have a look here, because this will be from the film.
Yeah.
Maybe? Oh man, Takeo Ishino is on there though.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with his stuff. Yeah. Oh man, I don't recognize any of them, because I love like Lithium Flower and all of that stuff, but I think that might be from the series, whereas that's from the Megatech Body is from the game music. From the video game.
Oh, okay.
So then maybe it was different stuff, but I might have to take a proper listen, because I just took a photo of it. I'm sure I've heard some of these songs before, but I'll have to take a listen. Then I can let you know what's my favorite.
Absolutely,
what my favorite track is. Otherwise, that's maybe us.
That's good. Let's keep the questions for next time.
Yeah. No, but thank you for sending that through.
Thank you,
listener. And then otherwise, man, I look forward to catching up with you again. Next
soon,
time.
man. Let's do it in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks.
Sweet. All right, cool. All right, take care.
Cool, man. Take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye.